Good evening, everyone, and thanks so much for joining us for tonight's coffee table community discussion. I am Michael Jackson-Heimos, and on behalf of the Morgan Wixon Theater, we are really glad you're here for this important conversation. You know, each month I keep saying that tonight's topic is really important, but it's true because each of our conversations have been so enlightening and thought-provoking, and I am really excited about this conversation, and I have lots of questions too. Hope you do as well. Before we get started, I did want to point out that it is a special day for the Santa Monica Theater Guild and the Morgan Wixon Theater. In the 1920s, 30s, and 40s, there were several small theater groups performing in Santa Monica area. Two of those groups, the Santa Monica Players and the Rand Theater Crafters. Actors in these two groups included Grace Godino, Mel Wixon, and rising star Glenn Ford. For whatever reason, which has been lost to time, a handful of local actors met in the parlor of a private home in 1946 to draw up plans for a new play-producing group that they named the Santa Monica Theater Guild. The group wrote up a set of bylaws, and on March 25th, 1946, they incorporated the Guild as a nonprofit organization and began developing the first season of the Santa Monica Theater Guild. That was 75 years ago today. So, happy birthday, Santa Monica Theater Guild and the Morgan Wixon Theater. My, how things have changed over the years. Did want to make a quick little thank you to all the folks that made tonight possible. And now, let's get to tonight's discussion. Appropriation versus appreciation. With these community discussions, I find the conversation so informative, and I continue to learn and grow every single month, and I hope you do too. What's the difference between appropriation and appreciation? If I go to a costume party, can I dress as a Native American with all the feathers and beads? If I'm going to an African celebration festival with my husband, can I, as a white man, wear a dashiki? Can my husband wear a lederhosen to Oktoberfest? So many questions. Where's the line? How does it all work out? That's what tonight's panel is going to talk about, and I'm really excited. It is moderated by my husband, tonight, André Jackson-Heimos, and I'm going to have him introduce his talented panelists who are going to try and tackle this topic. Hi, babe.
Oh, hi there.
And by the way, for those that haven't noticed, he cut his hair for the first time in 3 years, so that's amazing. And also want to mention out that two of your panelists, speaking of our birthday today, one of your panelists had a birthday yesterday, and one of your panelists is having a birthday next week. So it's a birthday celebration tonight. I'm going to go off. Okay, bye. There's the birthday girl. There's the other birthday girl. All right, you guys have a great conversation. I can't wait.
Thank you. Hello, community. Thank you so much for tuning in to talk about this topic, appropriation versus appreciation. Happy 75th, Morgan Wixon, too. I have a wonderful panel of very, very smart, insightful young ladies. Please introduce yourselves. I'll start with Achinta.
Hi there. Hi, Andre. Thanks for having me back. This is so exciting. Thanks, Michael. Happy anniversary. Birthday?
Anniversary.
Anniversary. I'm Achinta S. McDaniel, and I'm so happy to be here. That's it.
What do you do, darling?
Oh, me? I don't... Today or... So many hats.
So many. Yes. Right?
Such brown excellence. I have to be the best at everything. Let's see. I'm the founder and artistic director of Blue 13 Dance Company. I'm a choreographer in the industry. I am a professor at USC Gloria Kaufman School of Dance, and just am a loud, disrupting troublemaker.
And that's what we need, right? Denise, darling.
Hello, darling.
Hi.
Hello. Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here. Hi, y'all. I'm Denise Cabanella. I am an actor, filmmaker, activist, originally from Texas, now in LA, and a Filipino American. And I, is that what you wanted?
Yes, yes.
It was my birthday yesterday. I'm an Aries.
Are you kidding me? First of all, I'm sorry that I didn't know that, but I cannot
I
believe
thought you were talking about me. I was like, did you know it was my birthday?
it was. Oh my gosh, I am very embarrassed. Happy birthday, girl! My goodness.
Thank you.
His birthday too. Yes, happy birthday! I love it. A panel.
Aries season.
The girl, jump on here. Tell us about you.
Hello, hello, hello. I'm geeked because me and fire signs, like it's just my mind is exploding. And to meet another March 24th baby, come on, happy birthday, happy birthday. I'm Zakiya Young. I am from the East Coast. I'm from outside of Philly. I am an actress, writer. I started in theater, transitioning to TV and film. I do voiceover. I'm also an adjunct professor at Hushin College, which used to be studio school. Yeah, and I'm happy to be here. I'm happy to be back to have one of these conversations. So thanks for the invite.
Of course. Thank you, ladies. Okay, great. Let's jump in. So it's loaded. Appropriation versus appreciation. There's so much. What I really want to be able to do with these conversations is have a nice round table, really talk about where it appears in our life, some really good examples about it. And, you know, if we can get to a solution tonight, great. We're the upper echelon of people that can solve it. Or can we just get to an understanding, a little bit of an understanding of where the line could be? And so I'm going to start off with the definition of appropriation, just appropriation in general, which is the action of taking something for one's own use, typically without the owner's permission, or stealing. That's what it sounds like. That's also another definition and sounds like in that way. Cultural appropriation. Cultural appropriation is the adoption of an element or elements of one's culture or identity by members of another culture or identity. This can be controversial when the members of a dominant culture appropriate from disadvantaged minority cultures. So remember that definition, because it's definitely going to play into the end when we kind of have this idea of like, where do we go from here? And possibly like, what can we do that isn't appropriation? But I'll get there. So what I really want to open up for the floor, ladies, is what does cultural appropriation mean to you? And where do you see it as visible off the top of your head for you in your existence? I'll start with Z.
I mean, as a Black woman, I see it everywhere. And it's very frustrating because the things that were mocked are now celebrated, but not on Black women. So for me, appropriation is just seeing things suddenly appreciated that have been there for years, but are now held up as high fashion or popular culture. And it's very aggravating and frustrating. And I'm glad we're starting to call it out, because everything down to speech, mannerisms, nails, makeup, this whole jam. And I do think that it's a conversation that's long overdue, because Black women are at the bottom of the totem pole, but we're tastemakers and we don't get the credit we deserve. And I think it is the whole thing of ownership, especially in America, the place where you're supposed to be able to have the American dream, for Black people who were brought here to work and were denied the American dream. It's like, but we're making all of these contributions. Acknowledge it. Pay us our money. Show us show us your appreciation of what we contribute to society so that we can have the American dream as well.
Yes.
I love that, Zakiya. That's amazingly stated. And I would even say, just to add to that, the entire construct of pop culture, that's where we see it show up, I think, the most. But the entire construct of popular culture comes from the United States outward, right? This is the center, and everything goes out at the rest of the world. That's historically been. But what are the roots of pop culture in the United States? the original roots is theft of Black dance practices, specifically from enslaved people, and in the name of minstrelsy, then vaudeville, then Broadway, then the movie musical, then the musical, then the movie musical, then music video. So the entire structure of it dates back on oppression and theft, right? So and specifically, just to completely back you up and say yes to what you're saying, yes, and Zakia, is that the entire structure is built upon that. So that's to unpack all of these things, over and over again, and to evolve these conversations. Long overdue. And I think we're going to continue to keep having to say long overdue, long overdue, long overdue, because these things are so systemic, right? Like unpacking that truth and like educating younger people that even is true is a wild undertaking. Like we do it when we're teaching at the university level right now, and so many of the freshmen or sophomores are like, whoa, what? Like when we do that through line of where it's from, and I just said it in a really rudimentary way, but when we unpack it even over the course of a whole semester, it's like, and even still, there's still a lot of, from them who are so young, there's still a lot of, wait, no, but I don't see, like, why can't we all just do it? It's all dance. It would be great if we should all be able to idealistically get together and borrow from each other. Like, there's still a little bit of that happening. So I guess all the systemic issue, like how do we, besides at the university level and all of that, like how do we, to Zakia's point, continue to call these things out and unpack them and try to undo them? Is that what we're trying to solve today? I don't know, but how do we do that? But then also continue like the exhaustion of grappling with that defensiveness, right? Like in that and that like kumbaya kind of mentality of like that color blindness, that whole problematic construct. So I'm just adding to the problems instead of giving a solution. Sorry.
We have 2 hours. We need to solve it by then.
Write it down.
I thank you ladies for really paving that, conversation, because I see it everywhere too. I mean, in Black culture, Indian culture, oh my gosh, with yoga, because I teach yoga as well. But then there's like all this stuff about like, but a white woman brought it over and popularized it. And then, it's like, oh, that's a whole nother can of worms, say bag of worms. But with even, like people I'm Filipino American, but people wearing like kimonos as part of like their like trendy outfits and stuff. And it's when people don't show this like understanding or respect or pay tribute in a way that is respectful to that culture, that's appropriating. Or when they make it as their own and then they reap the financial benefits, that's appropriating. Like that is huge. Money talks. And then what happens to those minority communities that have been taken from? There are a lot of repercussions there. We're all in the arts. I love that you're in dance, that you, Zakia, that you came from theater. I did as well. So we as artists are constantly trying to understand these characters, these movements, these people, these cultures, but not everyone, is in that practice every day like we are. And I feel grateful that, I was like, I'm really lucky. No, I chose this career. I chose to be here. So yay, us and me. But I think someone said earlier, how do we, Achinta, how do we approach these conversations without like making people feel like attacked? Because white fragility is so real, as we know. So yeah, these are questions that come up for me and what I see and what I feel about appropriation versus.
So much.
Can I just like for one,
yes,
that too on the white fragility front, like just constantly, that white fragility and that whiteness is always going to recenter itself in every bloody conversation, right? Always, always, always. And then you're going to get all the time, or what I get here all the time, is like, well, it wasn't his intention. Like, you know, I didn't mean it like that. Or like, she didn't mean for it to be like that. I'm so sorry. I didn't mean it. And then cry. And now I'm taking care of your tears in the boardroom or in the Zoom. And now it's all about you. And now I feel like shit and guilty. And now I'm the monster for calling you out on your microaggression or appropriation or whatever it is, right? Then you're the bad. So that's why, like, when it comes to, in any respect, whether in the boardroom, Zoom room, or like we're seeing pop culture people constantly apologizing, right, for appropriating, like, I don't know, who's somebody like Katy Perry or something, right? Constantly trying on costumes in like a super minstrel show of Japanese culture, for example, at a VMAs, or for Black American culture for another, like just over and over again, and constantly apologizing. I didn't mean it. I'm gonna do better. I didn't mean it. Oh, I didn't mean it like that. I'm appreciating it. Like constantly, those are the same sound bites. So it's like, where's the point? And now, now it's all about you and how we're such brown and black monsters that made you feel like that. Right now, again, you've recentered the narrative to be about you. It's a key. I think you're going to say something.
Yes, and because I did a play called Disgraced, and it's rarely do I get to work with brown actors. Usually it's like either a Black show or a white show with a few Black people in it, maybe one Asian cast member. So when I got the chance to do Disgraced, it was so fascinating to do the talkbacks, because I did a tour of it. And we were talking about appropriation, because I have a Jewish husband. The main character is a man of Middle Eastern descent who has left behind Islam because he no longer practices it, but his nephew does. And his nephew solicits him to come to the aid of an imam who is being put on trial for something he didn't do. The main character has a white wife who is she's an artist, right? So she's very into Islamic art. So even though the main character says from the beginning, you don't understand Islam, she's like, no, you don't understand the beauty of it. So it's honestly one of the most amazing artistic experiences I've had, because the conversation about appropriation was so central to it, because that one decision for this man to listen to his wife brings him into this path of destruction, and that affects myself and my husband. So from the audience, when we start talking about how the female character Emily was appropriating Islamic culture, usually once a week, someone would say, but your character is appropriating white culture because she has a long weave, and that's not really your hair. And I would always say, I don't have the weave because I want to have it. I have it because I'm playing a high-powered corporate attorney who lives on the Upper East Side of Manhattan. So I can't walk in with my hair. It's like there's this, it's not an appreciation for straight hair. It's because there are laws being passed now to say, Black people, you should be able to wear your hair as it grows out of your head. We shouldn't be making you like straighten it. So it's interesting in that whole white fragility realm that there's this instant defensiveness. And it's just like, can you just hear what we're saying? Because there's wrong thinking, but it's structural. It's not saying you can't appreciate different kinds of art or different aspects of my culture, but just know that people of color don't have the same options as you do. I think everyone should see Disgraced, read the play, because it will spark all kinds of questions and discussions.
For sure, yes. There's so much was all in that. Thank you so much, ladies. Something that I remembered, racism isn't always an intention. It can be an act as well. And you don't have to have the intention to be racist to do racist things. And that's part of what our conversations are, and the reason why it's great that we're in this age of learning, so that people can just know that the simple things that could have happened are rooted out of racism. You may not even know they didn't. And it's not, and on a larger scale too, there's a lot of in this definition, we talk about the dominant culture taking from minority cultures. That's why it kind of seems like it's this white against everyone else sort of thing. Well, if you look at it from the standpoint of the colonizers, you know, at one point there was one country that had only not invaded 20 countries on the planet. So that's a big thing there. There's a big thing there with that sort of imperialism and that sort of colonization, right? To then take from different cultures, it wasn't necessarily an appreciation. It was picking and choosing what they liked and deciding this is something that we will start to do and we will do it this way. The reverse of that, because then comes the conversation of, my husband made a really good point earlier when he talked about a Black person wearing lederhosen that is in German, you know, for Oktoberfest. And the answer to that then becomes when, well, and maybe that's not the best example, but what I'm trying to say is assimilation. So then when minorities do things that might not necessarily be of their culture, but are the dominant one, it is because of assimilation. It's because they're told that you can't speak your language, you can't look like this, you can't do that. So we need you to do this. So the reverse doesn't always happen in that respect because it's not seen as you were taking from German culture by wearing lederhosen as however you want. It is, oh no, this is what you should be doing because you were here, or there's control here. This is assimilation. So having that dynamic, I think that was hopefully the answer to his question when we talked about the reverse of that. On top of the fact that it's also cross-culturally, you know, it's not necessarily always just white versus, but it's anyone. Again, it's any culture that is not of your culture or your own. Which brings me to, there's so much and I want to kind of pinpoint how I'm going to go into the Bruno Mars, because I think he's a really good example of cross-culture. And Bruno Mars being talented singer, songwriter, creative. I will say for myself, when he first came onto the scene, I very much thought he was a Black person. Okay, mostly by the fact that he was doing soul, R&B, like he was doing something that is rooted in Black culture. Or I thought he was Blackish, Black person or Blackish, Black something, not 100% sure. Finding out that he's Filipino-American, Filipina, his mother is Filipina, his father is Puerto Rican and white, I believe. So biracial or multiracial, sorry, multiracial there. He has, I feel like every couple of years when he brings out music, the conversation comes up again. Is he appropriating? Is he appropriating? Because he does soul music, he does R&B, he does a lot of old school music that is not super popular. Like it's not pop, you know, and he kind of brings it to the forefront because he is a popular artist. And it's just so interesting hearing his responses, that it's always been an appreciation for the music. He is a kid of the 90s. This is the music that he is closest to. He is always talked about his references of Prince and Michael Jackson and all these people that did it before him, as well as his band members always coming to his defense and being like, oh no, you know, he's always been appreciative of the music and where it's come from. Having bands that are always Black, like surrounding himself around creatives that are really indoctrined in the culture. But it seems to be this thing that he always has to defend still. And maybe it's just because new generations being introduced to him. But what do we kind of feel about that? Like, does that limitation of doing R&B and soul that's so closely aligned with one culture, but being able to do it really well and being of another culture, like how do we feel about that?
So I actually want to start off by specifying his ethnicity even further.
Okay.
So Bruno Mars, his mom is Filipino, and then his dad is Puerto Rican and Jewish. So in all of these, like, I mean, we're all colonized to the max, or, you know, just like oppressed, have histories of oppression and wrongful, atrocious discrimination. I mean, the man's got an amazing voice. When people hear him, you know, people will think, I mean, they're not going to think like, oh, this fine young white man has a voice. You know, they're not going to be like, oh, yeah. But he's had a lot of people give him flack over the years. But I think that he doesn't ever do it like he's taking ownership, or he's taking, like, he created that. He never comes across that way. He really does have an appreciation, respect for the music. He doesn't, sure, people have argued that he could benefit from his ambiguity, his ethnic ambiguity. But he's not said, this is mine, I made this, I am the person who created this genre. And that's just different. It is, I don't know, if someone wants to speak while I wrap my thoughts around another thought, Achinta.
I think you're saying it beautifully. This shit is complex, right? Can I swear? Yeah, I can swear.
Yes. Yeah.
I was like, oh my God, I would have said 3 swear words right now if am I thinking too hard?
There, I got it for you. I did it for you.
Please feel free.
You knew if you were having me out, there was going to be swearing.
Of course.
No, it is. And I think, okay, so I have many things for all of these, but it's not like, if I'm just going to beat Katy Perry, like if we're gonna do that, it's not like it's trying it on for one song or like a VMA performance. It's like the full canon of his work is rooted in this kind of singing, and I see it like, yeah, the feeling, the way in which we're receiving it, I think, is like more homage and real, and like a deep respect. You see that not just in the people that you don't see the people that are on stage with him sharing the stage as like props, like Miley Cyrus having a black woman as a prop, right, that she's hitting on the butt at a performance for a one-time thing, right? You see these people like I don't know what it is, and he's a great showman, but so are the people sharing the stage, and you see that camaraderie, and you know the backstory. I also think it's bullshit that he constantly gets the light shine on him, whatever it is, on him in this way. But then we have like Eminem's and Elvis Presley's of the world. Like then we have like Sam Smith, or who's the redheaded fellow?
Ed Sheeran.
Ed Sheeran.
Bieber. Like, come on. You kidding me?
Yeah.
You know, like they don't get the same, like maybe a peppered here and there, but constantly forgiven. And for me, those practices just come across in a very different way, where it feels like this deep, like delicious respect and like an immersion in growing up with this.
Thank you. Yeah, it was really hard trying not to curse. So then it's like, why is all of my brain energy just sucked out right now? So yes, he isn't someone, like you were saying, who's not just trying on these things for different award shows. He's been doing this for decades. He has been paying homage to these genres and to these artists, doing weddings as a kid, basically a baby. So he has worked and collaborated with so many artists over the years. It's not just like, now I'm going to release a rock album, and now I'm going to release a whatever album, rap album. And yeah, so there's an authenticity there, and also utmost respect. So that's a really big difference with him versus someone of any culture who doesn't pay that kind of respect to the origins of the music, of the culture, of the language, of all of that.
The originators, the authors, and sorry, wait.
No, go ahead.
Was a kid? Do you want to go?
No, I have a lot to say. Go ahead.
Okay, I know. Just one thing quickly was just because of the cross-cultural idea of minority cultures appropriating from each other. Yes, for sure that happens, especially, and I'm South Asian American, but can't even talk, like, just from a Bollywood standpoint, so much appropriation of hip hop, deep colorism, like a lot of problematic constructs there too. So that definitely happens. I just think it's not always like the Bruno Mars versus like Katy Perry as a white person. If we're comparing this way, another way that we could look at it is K-pop, which would be a whole other conversation. But like appropriation from K-pop or Bollywood of pop cultures, particularly Black dance practices and Black music practices, are deep. So I just wanted to point it out. Go Zakia, go.
Yeah, I'm here for all of it. First and foremost, Elvis Presley. I remember when I was very small, I asked my parents, why don't we love Elvis? And my mom, I can't remember if it was my mom or my dad, but they said, well, Elvis said one time that the only thing a Black person could do for him is shine his shoes. Knowing that his whole career was based on what he stole from Black music. So with that in mind, you know, I'm a 90s kid. Justin Timberlake used to be the jam. Yeah. But it's like seeing how Justin Bieber is handling it different than Justin Timberlake. I'm like, well, Bieber acknowledges all of his influences. It's again, like the appreciation. He doesn't, like when you were talking about, well, now I do this album. I think that was you, Denise. Now I'm going to do this type of album. I feel like Justin Timberlake kind of did that. It was like, well, now here's my country phase. Now here's my soul phase. It's like the difference between Eminem and Vanilla Ice. Eminem is from Detroit. Eminem and John B are real ones. Like they're gonna be at the cookout. Period. You know what I mean? Like they're gonna be at the cookout. They already know not to ask to cook. They're gonna bring soda. And they're gonna be happy to be there, right? They're not coming into the cookout like, well, I think it should be done this way. It's like, well, let me see. There's this fascinating thing as artists, as singers, where oh gosh, I love Bruno Mars. I love him. I think he's so talented. And I think it really does come down to like, what is in your marrow? What is your soul? Like, you know, when you hear Blue Eyed Soul, like Taylor Dane, my gosh, soulful voice, but not appropriating. You know, it's like how all of these, when I went to Korea for the first time, I was singing with a gospel choir. And I remember we were in Seoul and we went out to a night market. And I was like, yo, there's like break dancers over here. There's so many hip hop beats I'm hearing. Like, and I would turn on the TV and see these like elaborate music videos that like, I remember hearing a Korean Ja Rule, like the same texture to his voice. And I was like, this is amazing. I'm feeling so many things. Like, I had no idea, but I wasn't offended in Korea. I felt like it was an appreciation. And I don't know if it was because it was just so new. It really, the vibe felt more like, and it might be because everywhere I went, it was like I was treated like a celebrity and people were trying to get to know me. And I don't know. It was just, I'm on pause. I feel like I short-circuited someone else.
That's what happened to me. Oh, were you going to say something, Achinta? Okay, this brings up something, it feels like a little bit different, off topic a little bit, but there's something really unique about having American culture. Okay, so August Wilson, as we know, wrote African American literature. When I studied abroad in London and I watched Black English actors do something in the, what show is it? I can't remember. It was at the Tricycle Theater, but I remember thinking, oh my God, this feels even different. You know, American culture is different, even if you have the same color skin there. What is like our culture is its own thing. So I feel like I threw in a wrench, or I threw in another thing that's not really solving the problem, but that's just another thing to add.
No, it's so deep. I love it. I love when it's like a conundrum and we're like, wait, what the fuck is happening? Like I love when that happens. But that's also like the deep work, right? It's just constantly be moving and questioning and evolving and learning and not being defensive and stuck in our ways. Like that's why we're the people that are talking about this, you know? But anyway, so yes, okay. So to Zakia's point about traveling to a place and seeing it happen and being treated in a certain way, and being like, oh, this is nice. Like there's a good respect happening here. Is really interesting because then on the flip side, I don't know if this is the exact flip side, but somewhere on the Rubik's Cube is that let's say somebody, I don't know, somebody is a pop star and they're wearing bindis and they're doing like super really caricature minstrelsy of what they think Indian dance is. And they take that show on the road and it goes to Mumbai. They might be greeted with cheers and yes, and you're appreciating our culture in this really great way. Whereas here, we're like, what the fuck are you doing, Gwen? Like, take that bindi off your head. Or what are you bitches at Coachella doing? Take that off your head. That's a tikka. Like you don't get to wear that, you know? And then it's like the whole mishmash of, oh, great, you're wearing a feather headdress and a bindi and you know what I mean? And henna and the whole 9 yards. So it's deep on the American side too, but it's also like even in the studies of like colonial mimicry and even talking about K-pop stars really having such a problematic history then with really appropriating hip hop and then donning blackface, Japanese and K-pop stars like donning blackface, doing that. Remember that one like years ago, G-Dragon? Do you remember that?
I
There's
don't.
he like on his album or single cover literally had, sorry if this is triggering, but a picture of himself in blackface mimicking Trayvon Martin with the hoodie and
Oh,
everything.
wow.
Yeah. So then in reading about that, part of it is like, well, that they don't have the same history of enslavement, right? As we do. They don't study enslavement of Black people or the West African slave trade or Caribbean. They don't study that at all. I have a child crashing the party. They don't study that there, so it's not a let off the hook thing. But part of it, in one of the articles I was reading about this, was kind of being like, well, they're not expected to know about these things and how problematic they are. I was like, well, but the internet, and it's this is just a couple of years ago this was happening, and this constantly continues to happen. So just who do we let off with like a slap on the wrist?
Right.
Usually the white people who are like those same people who then are shifting it and centering the whiteness. Be like, well, Beyonce's wearing a blonde wig, so she's appropriating white culture. You know what I'm saying? Sorry for that. By the way, that was crazy.
No, but it's for real though, because Beyonce, sexy. Look, real talk. I'm 5'10". I am a curvy brick house of a woman. When I walk into the audition room with an afro, it says, "Oh, she's so strong." When I walk in with one of the wigs hanging on these wig heads that I'm looking at, that's long Beyonce like, it's oh, she's sexy.
Right.
Why? Because again, whiteness is centered.
And the assimilation.
Exactly. So it's like, I'm not appropriating. I'm trying to get a job. You know.
So much.
Yeah.
For sure. And I something that reminded me when we're talking about appreciation, but at what does it look like and how is it presented? And so Ariana Grande is a really prime example, especially with her 7 Rings video, because people really, there's other things to talk about. First of all, I'll bring up that even Ariana Grande is kind of marketed as a person of color. When she was even introduced to the world as a singer, she was marketed as the next Mariah Carey. So with that, I'm just going to say, if someone is to make an example, if I were to say, this new person is going to be the next Britney Spears, I would believe that you would in your mind think, oh, pop singer, probably white, probably over-sexualized, right? But if someone then goes, this is going to be the next Mariah Carey, and we know Mariah Carey is a person of color, you would expect, okay, probably someone who's a person of color anyway, and she wasn't. But it was never really made clear what her, especially having the name Ariana Grande, is she Hispanic? You know, turns out she's just very much Italian. And if you knew her from television, she was very pale skin, had red hair, like she was presented differently than when she became a pop singer. And over the years, it's gotten darker and darker and darker, which will take me into makeup and how that's kind of.
Please tell me we're going to talk about the Kardashians.
Yes, that's happening too.
Oh my God.
So, but it's interesting with Ariana because she has had this, okay, you're appropriating just in general on your look, a person of color, whomever that might be, as well as the Seven Rings video, which had a very strong Japanese influence in it at some part. And people were really outcrying that she was appropriating Japanese culture because she made herself look like an anime character. And there was all this symbolism and characters, and she's surrounded by Japanese women. With that, I then read her response to it, and her response being sorry, but it's been sorry all the way. When it's happened in other ways, when people thought she was Black and she wasn't, sorry. When people thought she was Hispanic and she wasn't, sorry. And then with the Seven Rings video, but then also it was, but I also have a huge Japanese fan base, and my intention was to show appreciation for what I thought was really cool. So does that kind of give it some leeway? I mean, is that total appreciation there, or would we have not gotten an answer if no one said anything? Like, would she?
That part.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and hi, Gwen Stefani was 10 years before you were 50 or whatever with Harajuku, so don't bullshit like you didn't know that happened. Your manager and you knew it would work and it would sell records, and like I'm saying, you're probably being celebrated in Japan, and like and so since people from your fan base are saying it's not bad and that it's okay in Japan, then you think that that's completely okay. So that's crazy. Gwen Stefani literally bottled Harajuku culture, a subculture of expression, literally bottled it into perfume. She took, I'm sorry, can I read a quote? Because I feel very strongly about this in particular. She literally, and I know one of the girls, Dre, you know her too, Jenny Kita, do you remember her? She danced as one of the girls, but listen to this. I got to tell you right now. I had to. I'd get me 4 Harajuku girls to inspire me, and they'd come to my rescue. I'd dress them wicked. I'd give them names. Love, angel, music, baby. Hurry up and come save me.
The lyric from
Gwen.
Yeah.
So I'm naming them. They're saving me. This is who they are. And then they're all on her red carpets with her throughout all of this touring and merchandising, literally making money about this, on this. And they are not permitted to speak in English. And they have to hold up the minstrel giggling schoolgirl. Yeah, so they have to uphold this narrative in this horrible, damaging way. So even to unpack that for the dancers who are hired on this, like I wonder 10 years later how they're feeling. Like that's just, it's rough. Since we're talking about even the idea of like assimilation, and it's a lot.
That is so upsetting. You know, there are parts of my life where I just like forget terrible things that happen, or even, you know, because we are assimilated, right? Like parts of assimilation are you give up your own culture to take on this accepted culture. There are times in my life where I look back, I'm like, oh God, it's just cringeworthy. The things that I let myself be or do, like, oh yeah, you're the token Asian, you're the Pokemon, you're the, you know, like, you know, and we play into that. I can only imagine what those dancers or what those people, I'm like, let's check on their mental health right now. Like,
right.
after this call, let's check on their mental health and see how they're doing. But I want to go back to just what you were saying, Dre, with the apologizing, and something that comes up for me when I hear that is when Scarlett Johansson accepted Ghost in the Shell, and she was like, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to like take anyone's, I didn't want to be, I'm like, I don't even care. Like whatever you're going to say right now, whether it's like you're trying to defend yourself, this is clear, but like, there's nothing that you can possibly say that's going to be like, I'm sorry, unless it's, I'm sorry, I shouldn't have taken the role. It's not acceptable. Because the character's role that she took was Motoko Kusanagi. And like, how is that possibly something that you should have played? There are other actors like Ed, how do you say it? Screen?
Oh, I don't know who that is.
He's another actor who turned down a role because he was like, this is not, I cannot take this role.
Okay.
There are choices that actors can make. And I know that like, of course, people want to make money and continue their careers, but we're having this conversation right now, even with the Southeast Asian and the East Asian community with Raya and the Last Dragon, where we're seeing a bunch of East Asian people playing Southeast Asian people. And I'm like, you have a different privilege than we do, so it's getting more and more and more complex. But now I'm upset. I'm even more upset. But yeah, the apologizing, like there's a point where you just like, just stop. Your apologies don't mean anything. Like it doesn't, what are you doing?
Well, I feel like even in her case, I mean, the apology is way too late because you filmed it. So
yeah,
it's not like I had no idea. Like you filmed it. You were told at the beginning, you were told during, I'm sure, and it happened already anyway. So it's much more difficult in that way. I think there's a conscious effort of like, I'm still going to do it. I'll just apologize afterwards, and maybe that will, or it's not really my fault. I mean, it's casting, right? Like
that entitlement. Like, well, it's not, they offered me the part. So at no point when you were reading the script, even in the character description, at no point did you feel a check in your spirit. Well, then we need to go back and unpack all of that, because that's a lot of privilege and entitlement. And circling back to Ariana, I was melting down because I remembered seeing 13 on Broadway. It was a bunch of little white kids, right? So then when Ariana Grande becomes this megastar, I'm like, who is this brown child? That is not the same person. So I read something the other day where they were like, any kind of racists should not be allowed to tan anymore. And I cracked up because I was like, that's so true. It's this whole like, let's tan so that we're just exotic or culturally ambiguous enough that people will be into us. And it's like, you're literally doing the thing that actual people who are born with that complexion cannot do. They get punished for. So it's this fetishization of the melanin that makes me so angry. And look, I'm not coming out against the child because she was a child when she first popped off. But I will say, I love a good comeback story. I love a good learning moment, because I will say in all of the talks, because all of us have been doing social justice work, I feel very strongly that I'm like, look, I'm basically starting to plant ideas in your face. I'm putting an idea in your face that you've never considered for your entire life. So it's going to take you a minute. I leave room for growth. However, there's a time when you should know by now. You should know. Like if you find yourself continuing to apologize, then you need to go back to the drawing board. I would love to see Ariana put out a video where she's not tanned, where she just stops tanning for a while, and let the talent stand for itself, so that she rejects what her record company and management recommended when she was a child and didn't know better. And she can come into her own, like Pink. Remember, Pink was marketed as like R&B, there you go. Yeah. And she's like, actually, I'm more kind of country rock.
I'm more indie. Yeah, I'm more alternative, like Misunderstood. Great album. So I wonder, I'm gonna play a little bit of devil's advocate here.
Wait, Dre,
With
can I say one thing?
Yeah. Oh yes, please.
No, and I love everything. We're all yes-anding to death, which I love. But yeah, when is it enough? And I really get there should be something for the ones that were the kid actors, the kids that were this was thrust upon them. And then which a little bit is some of that K-pop stuff. A lot of these kids, including G Dragon, are really young, and then they're like fully groomed and taken over by the label. Be this, do this, get this surgery, bleach your skin, do like all of this stuff happens. So there's that. But then when is the point for the Scarlett Johansson, for all these, using your position and we're talking about allyship and to really do the work? There are plenty of huge actors, musicians, people out there that in their riders, in their contracts, it's written about like there needing to be representation and appropriate representation of BIPOC, of increasing access and belonging. Like that's in a lot of people's paperwork and with their agents. So what's the problem with the Scarlett Johansson? Like when's the point where we're like, okay, that's enough? Like we're done with your apology tour and now it's time to do the work. Otherwise you're done. Like how can some people do it and some people don't? That's where like who the real underlying white supremacists are that are just going to continue to do it and apologize later. They don't give a shit. These are these are like the Katy Perrys and the Scarlett Johanssons, I think. So
Totally. I know. I have. In fact, we might all know. I have an actor friend who, when it comes to management, when it comes to like teams that kind of like push it on, he is Hispanic American, but could be ambiguous to some extent. And I know that he was. There was a situation where they're like, "Oh, we could have you play for Middle Eastern roles too," and he was like, "Don't even put me on that list. Don't even." That's such an obscure place for there to be casting that it really should be someone who is that, and I don't need to be a part of it. And so take yourself out of the running, regardless if you can pass for it. At the same time, like if your career jump starts in that direction, like how do you then rectify that? If you can pass as this thing and that is the thing that gets you where it is, you know, it becomes a judgment call on your own.
Denise, that's kind of what Denise, I'm not forcing you to take this. I feel like you were kind of saying that. And I wanted to also give you like love and support, Denise, because you are not alone in having had to like take the cringy gigs or made some things that later you're like, oh shit, why did I do that? So like, please hear me when I say like you're not alone in that and you're not being judged. But I wondered if you wanted to answer kind of what Dre was saying first, because I feel like you were stewing on it.
Oh God. I
You don't have to.
As soon as you said, I was like, oh my God, which question am I answering right now? If you want to say something in regards to that, yeah, I don't know. There have been
Go
ahead.
No, you.
Go ahead.
I was just gonna say, like, from a dance perspective, this shit is deep. Like being born, first generation born in this country to immigrant parents. Just the unpacking of like that bicultural realm and not fitting in ever, and having our own, like finally as an adult realizing I have my own identity and voice and culture that's separate and on eggshells, and then also like from a casting perspective as a boss, like wanting to have as much representation as possible for South Asian dancers is real. The dearth of South Asian dancers is real though too, and that's a cultural thing that most people, unless you're a me, like unless you're something that's like first generation born to immigrant parents and are an artist, that probably you won't know, which means you are disallowed. Most people are disallowed when you're Indian or Pakistani or Sri Lanka, disallowed from pursuing art, much less dance. And then especially male identifying bodies are definitely dissuaded. You can't, like, it's a hobby, then you can maybe do it, know that it's interfering with your studies in college, and then you go get your MBA and then you're done dancing. So like even not having the bodies to like to literally work with, not doing that cop out bullshit of like, hey, no one applied. That was BIPOC. I'm not doing that. That's bullshit in its own thing that a lot of people get away with. I mean like searching to give like great paychecks to be able to like really search and not be able to come up with that. That's like one part of it. The other part is like, yeah, is it appropriation? Like Andre was saying it earlier before I think we were on Hero about like, is it appropriating if Andre is dancing Bollywood with my company? Mm-hmm. Like they're not maybe seeing me behind the scenes if I'm not on stage. Is it less appropriating if because I'm an Indian boss and the choreographer or not? Like, are some of the dancers half Indian? Are most of them not? Because there are literally no South Asians except for 2, or like one of my girls might be half Indian or what? Like, who am I hiring? Is it a problem? When, you know what I mean? Like that's something that I like constantly, I'm like, shit, it is. What, oh no, what does it look like? Then I'm also gonna stand up in one way and be like, no, we're not belly dancers. I'm not gonna fake it. So go find somebody that's a belly dancer, right? Like we're also not gonna wear coin skirts. So don't ask us to, because that's wrong. You know, like where do you stand up for it? Where do you not? Like you want to get the job. It's that, I always call that wicked balance of like speaking up about things that aren't right and having a target, right, on your back and not getting rehired. Like that's the bullshit for BIPOC artists, right? Is like, mm-hmm. You want to stand up and be an advocate and hire and represent, and then you're like, oh shit, everyone's gonna find out about me and then I won't get hired.
You always take that risk. I mean, but like everyone has a choice. Seriously, everyone has a choice. In the past year and a half alone, I have turned down being considered for 2 different roles. There was a producer that for one role that was like really pursuing me for a Native American role. And I was like, there's just, I'm not gonna do it. You should reach out to a Native American people. And then they came back around like a couple weeks later and were like, are you sure? And I was like, yeah, I'm sure. Like, please do not contact me about this job. Here are some other people. Okay. But like knowing how, like if I don't have another solution, you know, I feel like I would leave them at a dead end if they're not willing to do the work, but they should do the work. But, you know, so many people are still copping out with all that bullshit, saying like, oh, we didn't look hard enough. I'm like, oh my God, there's so many talented people. And then there was another role that was looking for a Korean American led narrative. And again, I'm Filipino American. I have a different, yes, I'm Asian, but that's a different, like I really feel passionate about Asian Americans not being a monolith, and we all have our different stories. So we should honor that. So I said, what is this like? What does this all entail? Who can I read more of the script? Turns out this script was like involving conversations with like themselves, this Korean American person, and their identity. It was like really revolving around identity, and then talking to their grandparent about the Korean War. And I was like, no way, there's no way that I'm going to do this. And I asked more questions, and this is a story about Korean American identity. Yet there wasn't someone who was like, there was a Korean, like someone who had recently moved here, but not someone who was like, I can't project this and what their feeling is on this, but there was no one who was like Korean American and had lived here for a long time to deal with this story in a way that is like, yeah, I can vouch for this story. And I just didn't know. But I had to put myself in the position where I was like, you know what? These people are going to be mad at me. I don't fucking care. They're going to talk shit about me probably and be like, oh, this actress, she's so ungrateful. She's so like, she gives you a hard time. I don't care. Like, I don't care anymore. If that's like, if that's the system that I'm going to feed into, I don't want to feed into that system. But that's a choice. And a lot of people get scared, and I get that fear. It's not like I don't feel that fear. I just like am over it.
I applaud you and I join you in that, because I have had people say, oh my gosh, you're so talented. Why aren't you famous yet? And I'm like, well, one, thank you. But two, I say no to a lot. And it's no disrespect to the actors that choose to play these roles. I know me, myself personally, Book of Mormon kept calling and I kept saying, no, that's not my show. And I have so many friends who have made a lot of money and love the show, but I felt like that is not the depiction of Black folks that I want to be associated with. Okay. I will never forget when I saw Aida on Broadway, and I was like, why are there white Nubians? Why are the Egyptians white? You mean to tell me we don't have any Egyptian actresses, or we can't even use other people of color that are lighter skinned? Like, we have a whole community of actors of color. Why don't we have an Asian Amneris, a Latina Amneris, a light-skinned Black Amneris? But we had to go quite, and I love Sherry. We did Mermaid together. I love her. We weren't having these discussions. So when I'm not going to say I blew a roof off of anything, but I will say when I decided to speak out about what I experienced in Mermaid, with the racial stereotypes involved with some of the wigs, and how I actually spoke up, because I come from corporate America, and I was like, oh, there's a problem. All right, I'm going to go to stage management. You're not answering me? Great. I'm going to go climb up till we get to the director, because there were problematic wigs. If you haven't seen my video about it, it's on my YouTube channel. But basically, I was one of the Murr sisters, and we were doing this song where we were getting ready to see our boyfriends. Now, the Murr sisters were beautiful. We were all the colors of the rainbow, all different body sizes and heights, right? But the two Black Murr sisters, my wig had rollers in the hair, and the other Black actress had what can only be described as a pickaninny wig. Now, I remember being in that wig chair and looking at Cicely when they put that thing on her head. And I was just like, this doesn't make sense in context, because the heart of the piece was that little girls will be able to look up and see themselves in one of the Murr sisters. And my whole thing was, every Black person that brings their child to the show is going to be like, why are these two Black Murr sisters looking crazy? Now, to the credit of one of the costumers reached out to me privately, and he was like, I'm so sorry that I didn't do more. And I was like, I appreciate that. I mean, look, it's just that I don't want theater companies to think that just because you do one Black show that you no longer have to do the work. It's like, yes, I love that Disney has created so many work opportunities for Black actors, and I hope to work for them again. I do. I also know they might not want to work with me again. They might be like, oh, she did the most. She was not because they changed my life. But I'm also like, if you don't know, then you're gonna keep making the same mistakes and re-traumatizing the very people you're trying to help. So maybe next time, because I know they're doing a remounting of Aida, and I was very happy to see that the Egyptians were no longer played by white actors. I'm like, that's a great move in the right direction, but we have choices as actors. I get it. Sometimes you're down to your last dollar, and you're like I literally remember the last time they called me for Book of Mormon, and I had maybe like $14 in my bank account. And I remember I was on like, I think I was on like 40, I was outside of the August Wilson Theater and my phone rang and my agent was like, they really just want you to come in. Are you sure? And I was like, I can't do it because we have to start saying no. We
Yes.
have to start saying no because we're never going to change. We're never going to see what we want to see if we keep playing the same negative stereotypes.
Mm-hmm. So Disney, I mean, yes, grateful for Disney. So the Native American role that really comes to mind when I think of like, oh, they never cast Native American is Pocahontas. And who gets cast often as Pocahontas? A Filipino person, because we're darker skinned and a lot of Filipinos can sing, but like that, it's just like, how can we honor the lands that we're on yet like still cast people who are not Native American for these fucking roles? No, that's no, we can't do that.
That brings me to, it's a little bit more obscure, but it brings me to a topic of names. It's okay, honey. It brings me to a topic of names because I came across an article that was kind of in line a bit with the Hilaria Baldwin. I don't even know how to say her name now because I know it's not correct, the way she has been saying it. But it was talking about a woman who liked really obscure names, and she had 2 sons. Her first son's name was Storm, and her second son she named Comanche. And she is white. Her children are white. And kind of the conversation she had about it afterwards of like, how did you come about either people being like, oh, that's a really cool name, great, or being like, oh, are you Native American? And her being like, no, we just thought it was a cool name. It's like, okay, but the optics of taking this name that you probably don't necessarily know the meaning of, especially in that language, and putting it on this person who is the representation of this, the representation of who was a part of the struggles of these people, and it can be, the article basically kind of was saying about with baby names of really kind of taking that into account. Like if you're going to not necessarily be a part of that culture and just pick a name that you just like the way it sounds, really having an understanding of where that comes, like what are your optics? What does it look like? What is it doing? If you're not culturally bound to it in any way, shape, or form, what is the point? And is it even necessary? Did I make a point?
Well,
What
can
was
I
I
even like
saying?
add to the no? We're doing to just.
Yes.
I just realized too. All we're doing is adding to the complications
Yes.
today.
Yeah. But really kind of putting it in people's mind, because I think that's something that we don't take into consideration.
That's right.
I mean, I might love the name Yuriko, but I don't have any connection to it necessarily. And what can I then do that if I had a child and that's what I put on them? Because then their life becomes, oh my goodness, what is that? Are you, even as simply as Andre. Now, Andre is a name that has been indoctrinated into Black culture as well, but I still got it growing up. Oh, are you French? And I could be Black French, but it's one of those things where like, it's so closely tied to a culture, and our names are going to be, because that's where they come from. But it was this thing where like I had to explain myself, like, no, my mom just liked it.
Yeah.
And anyone's name, the root of anyone's name, Rashad, Akisha, my sister and brother, like those are Arabic names. So the root of any of it, I
Can I
wanted.
complicate it, Dre?
I'm sorry.
And then can I complicate it too?
Yes, I might always.
I was meeting with a presenter, which you all know, but for anyone out there who's not in this world, we that's what we call like theater heads of theaters, presenters, right? And he was like you. He presents as a super like tall, silver-haired white man, and he's like, you would never know that my brother is Black. You know, and the same thing. I'm Indian. I have an adopted son. My husband's white. And my son is part Cuban, but presents as a super redhead, blue-eyed white boy. So then, yeah, we happened to name him Duke, like after his father, but the other names in the running were Sharon after my grandpa. So like another piece of it, just to complicate things, when identity and like depth of knowledge of just other humans is like you know, the way we might think something and it can be completely different than what it is. Or like, if like, yeah, even my name, if you're talking to me on the phone and you have no idea, you're like, who is she? You know, I went to a chiropractor, and, which I only did once, but I went there. That's another discussion. Don't tell my dad. We went there, and he was like, "Oh, I thought you were black based on your name," and I was like, "I thought you were white Jewish." And with Seth like Milstein or something, you know, it was really interesting. Just
Yeah.
like and we were joking about it. It's like two BIPOC people too, which was interesting. But like you have no idea. And like Rush is my nickname, so I'm like, oh, it's Rush McDaniel. I'm gonna pick up the pie for Thanksgiving, and then I show up, and they're like, who's this? No, but honestly, like if Duke is like, I don't know, on the Harvard Bhangra dance team, right, in college, people are gonna be like, what's this white boy doing like on this team? Like who the fuck he is? And then he can like throw down with Hindi swear words and Punjabi swear words. But like honestly, that first perception is a little just an extra complication.
For sure.
So.
Yes, and I also think like my name, I used to hate it growing up. And I meet a lot of Muslim people who are like, you speak Arabic. And I was like, no, my parents got my name from a Swahili names book, but I was very good friends with an Egyptian girl in college. And when I met her parents, her mom, so sweet, just grabbed me with such excitement. And she said, do you know what your name means? And I said, yeah. And my name is Zakia Orbi Young, and it means intelligent princess. I know. So it's like, it became this, I started feeling proud of the name my parents gave me, whereas I didn't like it before. So I do think that with names, and I'm not a mom yet, I don't pretend to know what that journey is to decide on what name to bestow on your child. I'm sure it's a lot, you know. And I do think that I feel like there's a little more leeway with naming, because I don't know. I think that you should be allowed to name your child what you want, as long as you know the roots of what the name means. You know, I think that doing the work, if you name your child Comanche, all right, does your child know what it means? You know, versus just saying, oh, I thought it was cool. You know, like a very, it's the epitome of whiteness to be able to just do stuff and not honor the tradition, not give it the proper value. So I would say, like, I have a friend who's named Kiana. She's white. She grew up in my hometown. And when I met her, she's like white. She's not like white with like hoop earrings and like a short haircut. She's a white girl with long hair, and she's amazing. She's an amazing human being. But when I saw her name, I was like, huh? And then I had to check myself, because I asked her, and she said, yeah, my mom just really loved the name. And I was kind of like, that's so interesting. And I wonder if there's a piece of that with the names, that we're so, as people of color, not used to people honoring something from our community, that they would bestow that on their child. Like, it's not like a hairstyle that's going to go in and out of season, or something people are going to make money off of. It's like, no, this is a human being that is going to carry this name throughout their lives. So I feel like there is a little bit of like appreciation. And I know we're not going to go onto the Rachel Dole whatever track, but maybe we should, because I'm one of the few people that was kind of like, all right, should she have lied? Absolutely not. She shouldn't have lied. But also, she was kind of doing the work. So I'm kind of like, I've gotten into such debates with people about it, because I'm like, you guys, are we as Black women so downtrodden that we can't see that this woman is literally giving up all of her privilege to claim Blackness? Like, that's a lot. And it went into conversations about, like, is transracial a thing? You know, we're dealing with acceptance of all gender identities. And I'm like, so on that spectrum, how I would love to further have understanding of that, because it's like, well, if we are embracing what someone truly feels in their soul, they are, why are we surprised that this woman really identifies as Black? Does she have the same struggles? Absolutely not. But then that goes to colorism. Light-skinned Black people have problems, but they don't have the same problems that I do. So it's like such a, because I feel so torn with her. What do you,
Yeah, can you actually remind everybody about Rachel Dolezal?
Yes. So Rachel is a woman, I believe she lives in Oregon or something like that. And she was living as a Black woman. She was like president of the NAACP chapter. She was like with a Black man. She has Black children. She was down for the cause. And she was estranged from her white family. And I can't remember how she got it. I think it was like her brother was like, she's white. She's literally white. And yes,
Everyone see this?
so that was her growing up on the left, and that's how she is now, right? And at first, I was like, girl, why? And I thought that this was a typical example, like the Kardashians, where I know we're going to go, where you're benefiting from Black culture. But I was like, but this woman is doing work on the ground that a lot of people don't want to do. She was like a professor of Africana studies. Like she was really showing an appreciation for it. So I was like, I think we need to make a different, like a delineation between those who are just doing it because it's trendy, because they want to sleep with Black men, and those who really feel part of the culture. And I know a lot of Black women were saying, but she could do much more as a white woman. And I said, I know, but is that when you're so immersed in the culture, is it our place to say, you can't be this? Then we need to have a whole conversation about identity, then about like sexual identity as well. Like, I feel like we either should allow people to be what they feel or not. Like that's a huge, I can't imagine being a white person and being like, you know who I feel like being? The bottom of the totem pole.
What is the difference between Rachel Dolezal and Ilaria Baldwin?
Oh, well,
I mean, I know the difference. I'm just.
Yes, I feel like with her, it's that. Let me chew on that because that's a good. I have feelings, but I don't think they're gonna make sense. Give me a second.
Yeah, and I think on the other side of it too is like just being inundated forever by white people, and if we're talking about women, like I've come across how many that are like, I just like really connect with Indians, and like, you know, I'll call them Indophiles, speaking of yoga and all of these things like that. These are the things that I love. I'm gonna wear these kinds of skirts. That's not the same, maybe the same kind of person that's going to Coachella and wearing an anthropology headband for a day, you know, but this is somebody who's now really feels like they really connect with Indian culture, even though they weren't born as an Indian. They live their lives like this, including marrying an Indian man, having Indian child, like all of those things. I don't know. Like to me, that like there's so much of that. That's really like it where is it like, okay, do they have to be like doing real like deep work? Maybe that's what the line is. Like if they're doing deep work to help our communities or us as minority women or whatever it is that we're like, okay, then you can come to the party a little bit. I don't know.
For sure.
Because a lot of it for me is like a fashion thing with these women too. When I'm talking about like specifically of my culture of like of Indianness being tried on, and I'm not just saying tried on, I mean like tried on for years. You know, like now you do yoga, you do this, oh, you converted to Sikhism and you're this. I'm not telling people what religion to be at all, but a little bit if there has been like a woman who's been like rude to me and preaching to me about what Sikhism is, who's a white converted Sikh, that's great for you. I was born Sikh and raised in this culture. don't fucking lecture me if I don't go to temple. You get what I mean? Like that kind of, that like, yes, go do your religion. Like I respect all religions, do your thing, but then your white privilege and entitlement has then shifted for you to try to school all Indians or all Sikhs on how they should be good Sikhs. That's bothersome to me.
I have a huge, this is going to be it's going to open up so much. So talking about trending things, we're talking about things that are trending and popular with that, when it comes to fashion and makeup and everything. Is there a perspective in which visibility is greater if certain cultures decide to then take it upon themselves to involve themselves in it? So, for example, big lips are something that are really big for Black people and weren't the business until some years ago. Now we're all doing lip plumpers and having big lips are the thing. And the Kylie, right? The challenge that she did with the suction thing, like that became so big. And now everyone's getting injections because that's now what's considered beautiful. Is that creating visibility for like, that is now that's beautiful to us? It was all, is it widening what is Western beauty, as well as like the biggest thing right now with Gen Zers is the fox eye thing, which I can show you as well.
Oh my God, yes, please show all of this. I've been waiting to get to the Kardashians.
Yeah.
Since
So
the Tinder was like a
wraps into
Kardashian.
all of that. It wraps into all of it. Let me see. I mean, I'll just.
Oh, and don't forget about butts. People act like J-Lo and the Kardashians were the first people with butts, but it's like Black girls been have what?
Yeah. So this trend right here, this fox eye trend is real hot right now. You can see in the bottom, Bella Hadid is a perpetrator of it. So is Kylie Jenner. And it's a very minimal thing that they can do, but it does create this lift and this thing with your eye that is very Asian centric. So does it then make it more visible to then find, instead of that being something that I think, and especially in American culture, was kind of caricaturized, and where a lot of Asians were made fun of because of monolids or having a certain shaped eye, now becoming the beauty standard for these supermodels? Does it then just create a wider visibility for it to then be indoctrined into Western beauty?
Well, I think it's because that this whole like fascination with with mixed babies, like those are the most beautiful. Don't you hear that? I hear that constantly. Oh my God, you
All
and
the
Earl are
time.
gonna have. Don't you hear that always? Oh my God, you and Earl are gonna have the most beautiful babies. I'm like, oh, but my baby was probably not going to be as beautiful if I married an Indian or a Black man, right? Like,
So
because
much.
it's supposed to be like equated with whiteness. So that whole thing is based on adjacency to whiteness.
Always
Including centered, and all of these augmentations, surgical procedure, whatever, first anything, makeup, darkening skin, all this, now all the way into surgery.
Yeah.
But only because it's on white women.
But
You know,
yes.
and yes. Oh God. Okay. So the fox eye thing and the blah blah blah. Okay. So I mean, can you look up Kylie Jenner before all this stuff? Because she does not look anything like she does now.
Right.
Yet she is now like the youngest billionaire or something like that, selling makeup and things that change your look. So there's all kinds of layers here with appropriation, and also like with even not being enough of what you are, you have to change it in all kinds of levels. Achinta, I'm married to a white man as well. And so I get a lot of like, oh my gosh, your babies are going to be so cute. And he has red hair. So they're like, oh my gosh, and I'm like, oh, what would, if I married another Filipino, like, would you say the same thing? Like, would you? Yeah, look, who is that? Who is that person?
She was so cute. That's the thing that bothers me so much, because it's like she had
cute.
nothing to change. Like, she was fine. And it's so sad because I don't think it brings better attention to people who already have these features. I think it creates a subgroup of people who have augmented their faces, because let's keep it real, Black women with big lips and big booties are still put in a different category. We're not seen the same way as a Khloe Kardashian. I mean, moving to LA was like, because I literally have never seen so many. I was married to a white man. And so I know all of, yes, that's a whole other panel. But especially here in LA, I've noticed that there is this subcategory of Black men who are looking for non-Black women with Black bodies and faces. So I feel like it doesn't celebrate those of us who already have it. It's just saying, oh, I literally heard a Black comedian, I kid you not, he said, yeah, white girls are doing squats now, so I guess I don't have to date Black women anymore. And
I remember that. I was like,
I was seriously like, not only is that offensive to me as a Black man, because then he tried to check me, and I was like, bitch, shut up. Like, not only are you offensive to Black women, but you're offensive to white women too, because you're basically saying all you want is ass. Like, you are an ass and you bring nothing to the table. Like, I wish it shone the spotlight on us, but you know, the Kardashians saying that like box braids were, what did they like?
Boxer braids.
Boxer braids. I'm like, y'all didn't see poetic justice? You haven't been up to Harlem or to any Black girl who comes to school with her hair cornrowed with beads like I did growing up, and we got made fun of it, and you're making millions of dollars and you don't even know the history.
so much money. Yeah.
Or Bo Derek from N10.
I just,
The Bo Derek hair.
because like
Oh, you did Bo
exotic
Derek.
on others. And that's the thing. It's like, it would be different if it was like a yes and. You know, like, let's talk about Adele. There was an uproar over her wearing bantu knots and this outfit for the Caribbean Festival in Britain.
Yeah, Notting Hill Carnival.
Yeah. And I actually, when I saw her outfit, I was like, I don't mind it, because she's like, yeah, I wanted to appreciate, like, I'm at the parade. I wanted to wear what everybody wears. She wasn't saying that she came up with it. She wasn't saying it was a British thing. She wasn't even saying it was, I felt like it was more like, yeah, I want to be part of the celebration. I felt like for that specific one, it tracked. It didn't upset me, but I can't speak for all Black people.
And then Zakia, do you think also, like, I feel like, I don't know the context behind that. Oops, that was crazy. But like Andre brought up, like, if, or Michael came to an African celebration with you, would he be able to wear a dashiki? And then same thing for me. I'm like, my husband's white, and like, he's gonna fucking wear what I put him in.
Right.
Okay.
Indian wedding. So no one's gonna say he's appropriating shit. And same with my white presenting son. He is gonna wear an uchkin and a turban to my brother's wedding. Period.
But it's
Absolutely.
different too
So-
if you
but
are
that's-
going into, if
But
you're
like-
going to a celebration of a festival and being like, yes, we're representing it. It'd be different if Michael decided to wear dashiki if we were just going to like an all Black dinner.
Red Lobster.
Yeah, yeah.
But also,
It's just
but I
prop.
do,
But I'm sorry that I have.
Your husband too. So I feel like,
exactly.
I don't know. Is that what you're
Yeah.
saying? Because I'm like, if I hear like, oh, Adele's best friend was like, put this on, and her best friend is of the culture, I'd be like, cool. Or like somebody there was like, you have to wear this, Adele, you're here, I'm so excited, like, put this on. You just, in that way, I don't know. That's
Yeah,
Denise.
go ahead, Denise. Yeah.
Well, mine's going to sort of bring up another question about a whole nother thing. So I want to hear what Zakia has to say first.
Well, I do think that I love to see people appreciating African garb, but it's just there's something about the spirit in which you wear it, you know, and the way you communicate with other people. Like, if you're, oh, bless your heart, if you are a white woman who works in predominantly Black communities and you're wearing a daishiki, I'm like, why? Like, I'm kind of like, if you're coming from this place of, I have to help these poor Black children, I'm going to wear a dashiki. It comes across as disingenuous versus like someone who was like, yeah, I like this print. Oh, this is a dashiki. Well, let me learn more about it. I feel like that's,
Okay, this is actually perfect. This is actually perfect because this is where I was heading next. So, do y'all remember last year when the Democrats came out with the Kente clause? And then there was like a whole bunch of stuff on social media where people were like, what? Am I being pranked? What is this? What's happening? And then I looked more into it and I was like, okay, because first, of course, you see Nancy Pelosi wearing the Kente cloth and you're like, what the hell is going on? But then I learned that they were handed to the other members, to the other politicians by the members of the Black Caucus. And so I was like, that, like if John Lewis were to be like, yeah, let's celebrate and honor, like, where is that line? Like, is that okay?
That's a really good question, because now that I hear that, because you saw me pass out, now that I'm here, I didn't know that. I just remember the optics of it was like, y'all, come on, this is a bit much.
Yeah.
Like, yes, Black Lives Matter, but do any of y'all have Black friends?
Right.
Like, period.
And again, are you just putting it on as a costume for a photo? Yeah. And then, yeah, it's deep. It's deep. That's why, again, like just that first blush look at somebody, and not doing the investigation is interesting. And I also think, just like to tie it all kind of into this appropriation pop culturally, and since we're talking about Kylie Jenner, or that's her name, right? Yeah. Is like the pressure, especially for women, to like, and for all celebrities to constantly, especially now, right, with like attention economy being like 3 seconds and then the next thing to swipe, being so great to constantly have something new to stare at, to be flashy, to reinvent, to constantly, it's always about that, right? Like, so that pressure is so great that I think we're going to see more and more of the appropriation, or we have been seeing much more of that this past 10 years of more social media and all of this. I think we've been seeing more of it because of that reason of like, yes, all the privilege allowing it to happen, right? But also like, oh, I have to do something to stand out that's different than everybody else. And who's it going to bother if, what's her name? What's Justin Bieber? He used to date that girl. She's
Selena Gomez?
Selena Gomez doing a whole Indian thing. I was like,
oh yeah, she did a Bollywood performance at
God, horrible. Don't know who choreographed it. Right. Just crazy. Just all of it was crazy. But I also was like, for me, sometimes I'm a little more, especially with BIPOC women, I just am a little bit more forgiving when they're and younger and all that. I'm like, okay, learn though. Don't just keep going, but be like, I get it. All the pressure, everything that their mother is telling you, how you have to yourself as a BIPOC woman, like succumb to this white standard of beauty in your own way. That all the pressures of that are horrific too. So
I heard costumes and it immediately brought up Halloween. And I think that's a really big one when we talk about costuming. And why can't we dress like in a Native American garb? Or why would it not be okay to dress up like a geisha for Halloween? And even beyond Halloween, like Cinco de Mayo, like any of these, which isn't really even a holiday that's tied to a culture. That's an Americanized thing that we do here. But what, can anyone kind of explain like why we wouldn't use traditional garments as costumes for Halloween or for a party?
I mean, they're sacred. Like there's certain things that are sacred and certain things that are just downright stereotypical. I mean, I was in a white sorority in college. Like I've seen a lot. And yeah. And I can't help but think back to a ghetto white trash party that I hosted with my white blonde roommate from Mississippi when we were working a summer gig. And I dressed up like a white trash girl, and Like she dressed me up as a white trash girl, complete with blonde ponytail and camouflage half top. And I dressed her up like some white girl who lives in the hood. And we thought it was hilarious. And looking back, I'm like, oh, you poor, poor, poor thing. You poor assimilating Black child. Why? You know, it's like I had to forgive myself for doing that and then say never again. Like I've seen so many flashback pictures of like Greek organizations having like hood parties and dressing as the worst stereotypes of what they think Black people are or Black culture is. And it's just, it's so problematic. It's almost like there's no, like I've been following a lot of Native American people on TikTok because Native Americans have been so hidden. And to see, I love the ding, 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 what's that challenge? Ding, ding, ding. And then like, it's the Dr. Dre, it's like 90s rap and people are like dancing and then all of a sudden bounce and they're in full on ceremonial garb. And it's so beautiful. And I think it's like, right, we have a whole group of people who are like, these are our religious, our spiritual garments, and you are using them to get drunk in or to name your football teams after. Like, how dare you? Oh, sorry.
Yeah, there's even on a different level that's not as like as high as that. Like we already as a culture have limited information about all these, you know, cultures that are not the predominant white culture, right? And so when we show up, when a white, we'll say when someone who is of white descent shows up in a geisha outfit or we are perpetuating these stereotypes, this otherness that like, oh, this is the one day you can wear it. This is like these are all these people are, which is just, we know that's not true. And we are fully human, just like everyone else. And so when people put on these literal costumes for a costume party, it's a slap in the face. It's like you are a flat 2-dimensional thing that I can put on and take off. We're not disposable. And that's just, you know, that's my response to that is it's an oversimplification, it's reductive, and it generally comes from a place of just not knowing how important it is to the people who actually wear it.
Ignorance.
Totally, Denise. And I also think it's the way that it gets framed all the time is that it's honoring and appreciating because we're saying, but I think it's so beautiful. Like that's what I hear, like, oh, Indian women are so beautiful. I love your costumes or all of that stuff. It's always framed in this way, whether it's like some weird way of speaking or saying we're going to have a Bollywood prom or, hey, can we hire you? I've done these gigs. This is one of those places where I'm like, fuck, I can't believe I did that gig. Like, you know, where I have to like forgive myself about like, oh, I did it. There were a bunch of white people. All their white friends were over. They have a ton of money. They were in a mansion. They bought bindis. They bought tons of Indian clothes and Indian DJ. And there's me teaching. And I was like, what am I doing here? No one was overtly mean to me. But again, I'm fully erased everything that's like beyond just right here, to your point, Denise, right? And then like even those little microaggressions that sound like such wonderful, kind things, they're so beautiful, or oh my god, Indians are so smart, like all that whole thing. I'm like, oh my gosh, thank you so much, I'm gonna take full credit for it. Like what am I supposed to do with that? It's so uncomfortable, but it's always that shrouded in a compliment that's why I'm wearing this outfit. Or like we did a whole party, our frat just did a whole party for it because we loved it so much, you know? So that's where it gets gross.
Yeah.
Yes, and I should have had this ready, I didn't. But speaking to that, remember, Chinta, my reservations for here it is, um, for my what I wanted to wear to my wedding.
Uh,
And I wanted to wear something different and really cool. And I had been dancing with you, and traditional Indian kurtas are really big. But I remembered having this conversation with you of like, oh, can I do this? Like, is it something that will be okay? I want to make it into a suit jacket. I just really like the embroidery and everything. But I remember asking you,
you
I don't know
mentioned
if you
it.
remember, like, what the answer you
Yeah.
gave me. Do you remember what that was? Like, is this
Oh,
okay?
no, but I think, oh my
Yeah.
God, you're gorgeous. Hello.
Thank
Well,
you.
also, like, that's the other piece of it. Like, you and I aren't married, but like, you're one of my people that like you have danced in this culture. You've learned about it in depth, not just from me, but in your own research. Like, this is not something that you're like trying on, and you didn't have a Indian theme wedding. You don't interchange the word Bollywood with Indian as if it's the same fucking thing. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like, that's not what was happening. You were taking care about it, and we had fun field trips to
We
look it up, and
did.
then I for me it wasn't at all, and it was like, I don't know, any one of my like friends or people that have been, that know of the culture. I don't know if how Zakia or Denise feel about a similar thing, if that it would be the same for you, but for me, again, it just depends. It's like depends who it is. It might be a very different story if it's I don't know, a recent dancer or somebody that's like on the fringe that has just started taking Indian dance classes and all of a sudden decides that they want to shape their wedding after. I don't know. But for you, it didn't feel like that. It felt really just meant to be. I don't know. What do you all
If
think?
you were like, I want to wear a traditional Filipino garb to my wedding, I'd be like, yes. I'd be like, that's amazing. Yeah, it does depend on who's wearing it, but then again, also like who decides, like who is stewarding these narratives about like who's allowed to do what, and you know, um,
Other part of
And
questions.
that, I love that. Who is stewarding these conversations? Because it's rarely people of color that get the final say.
So
Mm.
It's
much.
usually, right? It's usually like a person in the ethnic group that is being offended will say this is offensive, and then you have well-meaning white people who voted for Obama who say yes, but I'm not racist. I don't see how this is racist. You can't. And I'm like, you can't speak as an expert to my experience. And I was actually just having this email exchange with a dear friend of mine, but she hit me up with some thoughts about racism, and she was like, it just feels so divisive. And I was like, girl, she wants us to get to the holding hands thing. And I was like, girl, I cannot hold your hand until you hear me. So it's all well and good to have these conversations, but people in the marginalized group, in the oppressed group, should have the final word about what's offensive.
Yep.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And it can
Yeah.
and it can be nuanced and change. It can be a conversation between Dre and me, and then you, whoever, don't get to then go wear an Indian outfit without, you know what I mean? Like, you can't use Dre and my relationship as an excuse for this. That's the other piece of it, like how nuanced it is. And then who's naming, again, that stewarding thing is so great, Denise. Who's naming these things? Another thing that just came up with a colleague from USC was like, um, putting out a statement for Asian and Asian American Pacific Islander community, and then somebody else changing like, oh, isn't it also Asian American Pacific Islander and they see American? And I'm like, well, I'm not down with anyone who's not they see, which can be a terminology that we use to self-identify as South Asians. Can be. I don't use it that much. I'm not offended by it, but I am offended if anyone who's not fucking they see says it. So I don't want to see it in a room of people, regardless of one of them is Indian or Pakistani. I don't want to be told, like, again, that's being authored by some other group to tell me what my identifier is going to be. You know what I mean? So that's
Mhm.
another piece of it. Like, who self-identifier, who's allowed to say what, like what am I called, and then like what are the monikers on the university level or on the political level that are being used and accepted, and then again not fucking getting stuck in those to be like this is what we had, but you know, because that's always the defensive thing that I was here. Like, wait, one day it's this and then it's this. I can't keep up. Well, if you're too fucking lazy to learn on a day-to-day basis, then fuck off. Like,
Listen,
what else?
Mhm.
we have the right to change our minds. And
Yes.
Black people are not a monolith. I'm Black.
Right.
You can trip over African American, but this space is a consequence of slave rape. I have white ancestry. This knows, come on. So let's just be real about it. We get the chance to change our mind. You've got to, it's not a one size fits all thing.
Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah.
Totally. There's as we kind of come to a close, I want to know, I have really kind of taken the reins with all the questions. So I'm sorry to the public. Are there any questions? I just been asking them all. My apologies. I had so many things on my mind, but if there's anything quickly that anyone else who's been watching has a question on, we throw it at us and we'll get it up. I really kind of want to get to a place of like, what are the steps in which we can appreciate more and do less appropriating, but also under the guise of like, we are humans and we will make mistakes. A lot of everything that comes to when it comes about with race relations is taking ownership and responsibility for the things that we've done or do in the past. And I think it's really important that if you get called out for it, it's not necessarily, depending on what the intentions are, you know, a judgment on your character, but it can just be a learning opportunity. I gave an example as if I somehow find this wonderful piece of jewelry that I don't know what it is and I don't know where it comes from, but I find out that it might be a ceremonial piece of jewelry for some, you know, from a different culture. I just have to be made aware of it. And then I can go, okay, thank you. I will not wear it to this rave, you know? Okay, like I won't
You have to
honor
travel
that.
back in time.
Right.
It's a time traveling necklace.
Oh my God.
I have
No,
a,
I love
here's a
that.
question
Trey,
here.
that's great. Oh,
Oof.
Oh my
that's,
goodness, that flew by.
can you read that?
How is it
What do we-
time?
Do you see it? Do you
Okay,
see
wait,
the
there's a
button?
few questions. Let's see.
I've got one. I think it comes down to who is making money off someone else's culture. If not, it's probably then appreciation. So if you're not making money off of it, if you're not benefiting financially or even visibly from it, versus, you know, then is it more appreciation on top of it than
I
appropriate?
mean, I think even like somebody just for their Instagram story to be like, you know, wearing a kimono in a really inappropriate way with a corona is not making money, but I still think that's appropriation and damaging. And then again, intention doesn't matter. All that matters is you're causing harm. So
Mm.
just be a good human and don't cause harm. And yeah, but learning from it, that's a good way to go.
For sure.
Yeah, owning up from it, not being so defensive and talking down, like not being afraid that you don't know everything. It's okay to learn from other people and then continue in that. What's
Yeah.
that about? Yeah.
It's
I
okay.
Go for it.
I wanted to back that up. Like, yes, it's okay to learn. It's okay to say, I didn't know. But I think there's this pride issue. And I don't know if it's because white people have always been seen as the experts because they've been positioned as the experts, to suddenly be like, oh, I didn't know. Okay. Just learn from it. Don't do it again.
Yeah. Shame has such a huge place, you know, as we know, anyone who studies Brene Brown's work, it's like shame plays such a huge part in how we move as individuals in our society and like how we respond. So I feel like coming back to the white fragility, if people are willing to know that, like, okay, you're not, like, people are so afraid of being canceled right away, you know.
Whole other panel.
Yeah.
Oh,
Whole other.
And but there's that fear, but I don't know how to tell people to just like take accountability. Take accountability. There we go.
Just like, you know, it's like white folks invented cancel culture. Remember the book burnings, like the Dixie Chicks.
Yeah.
The Republicans canceled the Dixie Chicks.
Yep.
Now they say one thing. So it's kind of like, I think it's the people that don't want to be canceled because they're not used to being canceled.
Well, it's such a distraction too from what's happening. And again, you know what's happening, because this will always rear its head, just like drug addiction and all of it. This white supremacy, whiteness thing will also always recenter it, because now we're like talking about the white people and how they're fragile, what they can do, and how they can, you know what I mean? It just happens. Yep. That will always kind of take over about, like, the question is what can the white people do? Where's the line for them? But it's like, we don't need to be, they just need to sit back and listen right now and be quiet. Yes. Learn and step up and be an ally, or write it in their rider when they have the position to do that. And that's it. You know, I like that Andre called it, what'd you call us? The age of learning right now, which is great. And hopefully that's true, right? Is to, like, give the space for the BIPOC people to have the floor like this.
Yeah.
The Aries.
But,
yes.
The Aries White Husband Club.
Totally.
And we are learning so much.
Susan had some couple of jokes. I am not 100% sure what the Jay Leno's apologies for his past jokes that he's done. I'm not privy to him.
Racist, anti-Asian jokes by Jay Leno.
Oh, okay.
Apologize for.
He did recently, or he has in the past.
He just did. I think it was yesterday, or just very recently.
What?
Yeah.
Oh my God. I've been enjoying my birthday and not doom scrolling on Twitter. Oh God. Okay.
I'm not a fan of Jay Leno anyway, so I don't really, also I'm like, well, he's not canceled, but, like, he's irrelevant to me. So
yes, he's irrelevant. Yeah,
I think it's nice. I mean, if you can be, again, you know, we're in this information age, we're in this progressive age right now too. Things as early as like 2015 are problematic now, and so we're finding out that just the things that we've been doing of the past, the jokes we've been doing of the past, the things we thought were funny and all that stuff is just not necessarily working. And so that's part of the journey we're doing now. And again, it's just about taking responsibility. You know what? It was insensitive. I didn't realize it at the time. I realized it now. I will not further my career perpetuating that same thing. And I apologize for that. I did, and I apologize for I hurt them. But again, taking that ownership of, like, I did this thing wrong, and I can learn from it.
Well,
Andre, Susan has given you Jay Leno's apology there.
Oh, gotcha.
Read it?
Yes. I'm issuing this apology. I do not consider this particular case to be another example of cancel culture, but a legitimate wrong that was done on my part. Mana, M-A-N-A, I don't know that, has been very gracious in accepting my apology, Mana. I hope that the Asian American community will be able to accept it as well, and I hope I can live up to their expectations of the future. Oh my God, that's perfect.
Yeah, it's good.
It's not perfect. I'm sorry. I don't necessarily want to say that that's perfect for everyone, but I think it is an acknowledgement of, like, whoa, yeah, I messed up.
I have to get this out, Dre, is that, like, also just time and again is, like, the apology is cool, and then, but it has to be, like, quick, I apologize, I'm going to do better, and then just do the work and shut for a while.
Yes.
Because otherwise, again, it's that fragility thing and the let me wipe your tears tour. So
yes.
So that it's Media Action Network for Asian Americans.
My apologies. Okay, thank you.
No worries, because if I was like, it's like that conversation where acronyms, you don't really know how to say it until you say it out loud, and you're like, is that how you say it? BIPOC, B-I-P-O-C? Like that conversation that we all had, and then we're like, okay, yeah, is that how you say it? I say BIPOC too. Yeah.
We're all still learning, and that's the beauty of where we are right now, is, like, we can all just listen to each other, we can all just learn from each other, and every one of us can just up level in intelligence just by listening and doing the research and being okay with being told, like, hey, that was wrong, being called out, not in a bad way, just like, it's actually this, it's actually that. I said Hispanic American earlier, I actually meant Latinx.
But if I hurt you, Dre, like, if I hurt you, then it's okay if it's in a bad way that you're like, you did this, you said this word, or you did this and you hurt me. Like, it's okay. I
Yeah.
can then also, it's okay. Like, I'm also tired of being like, this isn't a personal attack on you. Like, it's fine. That's a part of the fragility thing. Like, let me baby
Right.
you and put this in a bite-sized morsel so that this person can understand it. You know, it's just, I think it's okay to just be like, cool. And everything that we think in BIPOC might change tomorrow, and being okay with having to perpetually have to think and do the work. Like, all BIPOC have to constantly be walking on eggshells. Am I saying the right thing? Am I coming across too aggressive? Am I coming across to this? Like, we're always doing that. And so then a lot of the defense comes from, I think, the white folks in the room who've always had the privilege and now have to be like, oh shit, I have to constantly think. I have to keep thinking about what I'm going to say now. That's where, that to me is like where the root of it is the fear of that work. So,
And I also thank you for that. And I also want to remind everyone that it's not just like BIPOCs versus white people. It's like BIPOCs with each other. You know,
Yes.
we are all having these conversations with each other, me with my other, you know, BIPOC friends. And there are ways in which we can call out and ways in which we can call in.
Yes.
And that is something that we got to, you know, like, be really mindful about learning how to do with grace.
That is a beautiful statement to end this conversation on.
Wow.
That was great. I love that. And that's why I do really love these conversations. I'm not sure about the other white husbands of the panelists, but this white husband and his BIPOC husband will be having another conversation for the next hour and a half, because it happens every Thursday. We have these conversations because it does make you think, and it does bring up questions, and that's what this community discussion is meant to do, is to keep the conversation lasted 2 hours. Can't believe it flew by so fast. I told you guys that every moderator says it'll be about 30-40 minutes, and I'm like, it's been 2 hours, everyone.
Yeah.
But the conversation doesn't end here.
yeah.
The conversation continues, whether you watch it on YouTube, whether you talk to a friend, whether you say, hey, I watched this community discussion last night, and you know what I learned? You know, that's the point of these, is to keep the conversation going. And I, on behalf of the Morgan Wixon, am so grateful to the four of you for sharing tonight and giving us a whole lot to think about. And we've got all sorts of wonderful comments here, thanking you guys for being here.
Thank you, Michael.
So thank you very, very much for being here. Don't forget that, if I can scroll up to it real quick, our next one next month is Fat Phobia, On Stage and Off, Where Do I Fit In? We have a whole bunch of plus size models and actors and actresses who are going to talk about those issues that they face. Another really great topic to talk about. And also, don't forget our solo stories. Amazing women with journeys. In fact, while you three women were talking about your journeys, I thought, I wonder if any of them have a one-woman show, because all these one-woman shows are just amazing stories of their journey, whether it's their father murdering their mother, or whether it's their transgender child coming out at age 5, or whether it's first-generation Chinese woman and her Chinese immigrant family. Like, they're wonderful stories. So please check them out. They're only $20 per household. You can get all the details on our website. And once again, thank you so much to the four of you for being here. And thanks to everyone there at home who joined us tonight. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Have a great night, everybody.
Ladies.
Thank you. Thank y'all so much.
Thanks, Dre.
Oh, where's my thank you?
Thank you.
There we go.
Let's get vaccinated and go to their backyard in a couple months.
Yes,
Yes.
Yes, please.
I love it.
Thank you so much. Good night.
Thank you guys.
Good night.
Wow.
Good job, babe.
Thanks. Are we still on?
See you in a minute.